So hello and welcome from my side. I'm Mattheis from United Nations University's Institute for Comparative Regional Integration Studies, and it's my pleasure to moderate today's webinar. So for just a word about our institution, for those who are not familiar with it, so the United Nations University is an agency of the UN who that is dedicated to research and providing knowledge into the UN system, but also more generally worldwide. And our institute is located in Bruges in Belgium, and we're focused on comparative regional integration studies. And it's within this framework that we're very happy to host and co-organize this seminar, which will do precisely what we set out to do, which is comparing how different regional integration processes face challenges around the world, how they evolved, what are similarities, but what are also very distinctive patterns that we can distinguish between those regions. So the way we've structured this seminar is, so I'll first introduce the speakers and co-organizers, and then we'll be giving each of the panelists time to reflect on the topic of crisis, of polycrisis, of global fragmentation from their specific region. Then I'll pose two questions for them to answer each. We'll have two quick tour de table afterwards, and then we'll be welcoming questions and comments from the audience, so from all of you. So at that point, feel free to either type your questions in the chat box or raise your hands, and we'll bring you in and have a discussion with you and the panelists. So that's from my side. So let me first present. And starting with Dr. Joel Peña, who was sort of the brain behind the seminar. So thank you very much, Joel, for having the initial idea and putting this together with a lot of commitment and enthusiasm, and who will be speaking from the Latin American perspective in a minute. I'm also introducing my dear colleague at UNU-CRIS, Gaëlle Pavic, who will be bringing the European perspective, but that was also very instrumental in organizing this webinar, and who I can mention this, who just defended her thesis earlier this week. So congratulations again on that big achievement. Then changing continents once again, Babatunde Fagbayibo from the University of Pretoria is covering the African perspective. Then moving on further through our list. So I'm going from right to left. If you're following our poster, we'll be moving to Thailand. Dr. Sineenat Sermcheep, who will be covering the more Southeast Asian perspective. Then we'll have South Asia with Prabir from India, and then we'll finally, last but certainly not least, Galip Dalay, who's based in Oxford, and who'll take the Middle Eastern perspective. And so we have very, as you see, a very broad coverage. So it's not often that we're able to cover basically all world regions. I'm also very thankful to the speakers that come here at very different times of the day, from morning to night. We have all times, and I think among the audiences probably as well. So thank you very much for making the effort. Right now in Belgium, it's a very convenient 4 p.m. But I know for some of you it's still quite early or late. So thank you for making the effort. So with this, I'll be starting the round of first comments and inputs from the speakers. Before giving the floor over, also to mention that so we'll be recording this webinar, so it will be available later if there's some parts you didn't catch or you want to see again, and we'll be also preparing a short brief summing up the main points of discussions, so which you'll find available as a UNU-CRIS working paper. So it's going to be freely available on our website in the next few weeks. So so do check out our website for this brief, but also for other work on comparative regionalism. All right, I've talked enough for now. So we've decided to go in the order as presenters have been listed on the poster, so which is a reverse order that I just introduced everyone. So it'll be my pleasure to first give the floor to Galip Dalay from Chatham House in the UK, and to share his perspectives on polycrisis on a global level, but also on a regional level, and the fragmentation that has been growing, especially over the last 2 years in different policy fields. So we see this, whether it's security, whether it's climate, whether it's criminal activities, whether it's migration issues. In almost every policy issue, we see a certain crisis, and these are crises that are often reinforcing themselves, therefore creating this idea of polycrisis. But at the same time, we also see fragmentation, increasing polarization over different geopolitical topics, but also over these policy topics. So how to address climate change, how to address migration, etc. This is creating big rifts in geopolitics today on a global scale, and then we want to see how the different regions react to that. So if I can give the floor to Galip, so please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. And it's great to be here with an expert group from almost all over the world. So therefore, that provides an excellent opportunity for a comparative perspective. The question of the regional integration or regional cooperation once again has become quite an attractive topic for different reasons. So different things has triggered this. Once again, the question or the crisis of the globalization, or the idea of the deglobalization might be taking place, or the idea of the once again redesigning the supply chains in a way that will be closer to the different centers of the economic activity in the world. And that's all this is bringing up the question of regionalism or regional cooperation idea to the fore. But there are also broader systemic factors that is once again triggering the question about the regionalism or the regional cooperation or the regional powers. Many of them are also being framed in discussion as the middle powers. One of them is once again the idea of the great power rivalries, and with this the idea that the contemporary global order is experiencing a major crisis or is dysfunctional in one way or another. And with this also the Western centricism of the global order more and more questions across the world, and that's all of them is once again brings the focus on the regional units, the regional powers or the middle powers. But while discussing this issue within the Middle Eastern context, I think the present and past goes hand in hand. So the politics and history, the international relation or the regional politics, and then the history has to go hand in hand, because the Middle East is not late to the idea of the regionalism, regional integration, or regional cooperation. Actually, it is one of the early examples that tried to engage in regional cooperation, creating regional institutions. The Arab League was established the same year that the UN was established, 1945. The region, Middle East, has quite many regional institutions, or supposedly supranational or institutions, the supranational cooperative frameworks, be it the Arab League, be it the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, or the Arab Maghreb Union, or some of the defunct platform or institutions such as Arab Cooperation Council. So we can expand the number of the regional or sub-regional institutions in the region. So therefore, the Middle East was not late to the idea of the regionalism and regional order or regional cooperation in the world politics. And also another sign of the regional cooperation, which is the regional institution, it also has many of them. Despite this, it is a region that experiences one of the least form of the regionalism and regional cooperation. So you have a paradox here. On the one hand, it is actually an early on, the Middle East was one of the region that was present at the discussion of the regional cooperation, creating super-regional organization quite early on, the same year that the UN was established. It has many regions, but it has a very low regional cooperation or intra-regional engagement cooperation activity. So why is this the case? And that brings us to what I call the 4 crises of the regionalism in the Middle East. One of them is the difference between ideological projects and region building endeavors. Because most of the regionalist efforts in the region actually had taken the form of the ideological projects rather than being in political, economic, or geopolitical region building efforts. Take it, the pan-Arabism and the pan-Islamism for a long time were the defining or the most potent ideological groupings in the region or social ideological movements in the region. And both of them manifested itself through different organizations. To some extent, the Arab League also can be seen at some stages, one manifestation of the pan-Arabist visions. Then the Islamic Cooperation Council, Islamic Cooperation Organization, and its early form, to some extent, was regarded also as a more Islamist or conservative response to this. But inherently, those were ideological projections rather than the real or geopolitical or economic region building activities. So the difference between ideological projections and the region building efforts has to be that. Secondly, the question of the domestic political order of the state and the regional order are intimately and intricately intertwined in the region. The crisis of the domestic political order across the regions, or the prevalent illegitimacy or the perception of the illegitimacy of the domestic political order across the region, also prevents the emergence of a functional, legitimate regional order. The Charles used to say the rulers who, or the regimes who mistrust or distrust its people will not trust its neighbors for regional cooperation. And I think that's very accurately and aptly putting it, because the mistrust of your people, the regime's mistrust of its people, or distrust of its people, translate itself also mistrust of cooperation when it comes to regionalist activities. Therefore, all these regional cooperation frameworks are more of a show rather than a concrete and real things. Yes, there are several regionalist efforts that had more real substance, such as the Gulf Cooperation Council can be regarded like one of the relatively enduring regional platform or regional sub-regional efforts. But most of the time, the regional cooperation frameworks that are emerging in the regions were not premised on a legitimate domestic political order of the regimes or states that were coming together, and therefore this illegitimacy or the mistrust of the people at the domestic level also translates itself into the mistrust of any real cooperation or enduring regional order at the regional level. The other element that I would say is the idea of the exclusion that were at the core of many regionalist endeavor in the Middle East. The exclusion or the containment, the logic of exclusion and the logic of containment were very much present or were very much integral to most of the regional organization or regional efforts. I mean, look at both the past efforts, or the past examples, or the present examples. Like one of the early form of the regional cooperation framework was the Baghdad Pact, that back then in 1950s brought the pro-Western camps of the regions, that was supported by the UK and the US. The UK was part of it. The US could not become part of it. So it was a platform of the pro-Western actors in the region that brought together Turkey, Pakistan, Iran back then, because back then Iran was before its revolution, so was a pro-Western actors, and Iraq before the coup of 1958. Obviously, the name of Baghdad Pact in itself indicates this. But at its core, the declared or undeclared constitutive order of this Baghdad Pact was the revolutionary Arab camp, the revolutionary states or the Arab camps in the region, and also the Soviet Union or the communism, the regional communist networks were the constitutive order of this effort. So that was like from the start quite an containment-based, exclusion-based efforts. So you can take this all the way to the present, or the GCC, whether declared or undeclared, the Iran question or the perception of the Iran threat is at the core of the GCC. But the Iran is a major Gulf actor. So the moment that you decide to contain or exclude Iran, and obviously you cannot have a very inclusive and functioning regional system in the Gulf, in the broader sense of the term, not just like the Arab Gulf per se. Or the recent example of the US or the Trump supported the Arab NATO initiative, which is like largely defunct by now. But again, the idea behind this was basically anti-Iran. The anti-Iran logic was part and parcel of this logic. So this containment or exclusion-based logic of many of these regional endeavors or institutions is one reason why they are not functioning. One latest example is, for instance, the Eastern Mediterranean Energy Forum that brought together the several Arab states with Greece, Cyprus, and Israel was part of it. And obviously one of the constitutive order of this process was also the exclusion of Turkey. And again, basically the gas pipeline that was supposed to be the gas pipeline project from the region to Europe, that was also supposed to be one of the outcome of this platform, became unfeasible with Turkey's opposition to it. The third point is the external interventions or the external logic of the regionalist projects. Obviously, the external intervention is clear in this case. I mean, the Iraq invasion of 2003, and you can, go beyond, go even more in history. You can start with the Suez Canal crisis of 1956. You can come back, to the present day. So the external intervention is one of the factors that makes it quite difficult, the creation of the regional units. But not only external intervention, the external logic of many of these regionalist endeavors is also one reason that they are not being seen legitimate across the region and unable to create a functional regional order. As I mentioned earlier, the Baghdad Pact is one of the manifestations of this. From the start, it was the manifestation of the pro-Western actors in the region. And one of the constitutive logic of this process was containing the Soviet influence in the region and the revolutionary Arab camps in the region. So, and it was supported by the UK and the US. So therefore, there was a clear external logic from behind. But also look at the recent endeavors, from the Abraham Accord to the Negev Summit, to the recently announced the IMEC connectivity project that is supposedly connects India to Europe via Middle East, is a connectivity project. All of them has a very strong external logic. At the core of almost all these recent regional efforts were, like in the last 10 years, let's say, were to create some form of the regional order premised on the Arab-Israeli cooperation excluding or disregarding the Palestinian question, and excluding non-Arab element of the regions, namely Iran and Turkey. And also some of this project is decidedly meant to undermine China's footprint in the region, and also some of them also by extension the Russia's one as well. I mean, one element of the IMEC is basically to compete or undermine the BRI, the Belt and Road initiatives in one way or another. So such external logic of this regionalist endeavor obviously bedevil them with the many crises. Like, how can you, in a sense, exclude some of the major actors of the region and at the same time create a functional regional order? So can you exclude, let's say, Iran and Turkey at the same time and create a functional regional order and disregard the Palestinian question? So all of them cannot be attained at the same time. And the reason that many of the states in the region were willing to go along with this also has to do with their perceived illegitimacy at the popular level. And what they lack at the popular level, they try to make up for by having strong international partnership. So all these factors is what I call form the crisis of the regionalism in the Middle East, which we can discuss later in a Q&A session. So I can leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Galip, for this very concise overview of things that we see some issues for regional integration. I mean, very clearly in your region, and how the global and the regional is really intertwined. I'll directly move over to Prabir, who is joining us from Delhi, from the Research and Information System for Developing Countries, and he'll give a perspective from the South Asian region. So please, Prabir, over to you.
Thank you, Frank, for the invitation. And first of all, I'm grateful to Dr. Joel for putting me in the group. I'm a pretty unknown face in the circuit, but this is an opportunity for me to represent South Asian case study on the regional integration. I have a slide for even, it won't take much time, within less than 10 minutes. Can I go ahead with sharing my slides, Frank?
Yes, if I think you are a co-host, so it should allow you. Yes, okay.
Can you see this? Yeah.
Yes, please go ahead.
Right. Can you see this, my slide? Is it visible to you?
I can see it. It's not in full screen mode, so you can.
Okay. I don't know whether I can have a co-host, but unable to share.
But it's there already. Like it's fully visible. Okay. It's just not full screen, but maybe it's okay like this.
Let me first, put it the type of regional integration in the South Asia. Well, we have 3 regional blocks. It's called SARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. There is a free trade agreement up and running. There is another regional block called BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical Economic Cooperation. There is an FTA being negotiated. And there is another sub-regional cooperation called BBIN. By alphabetical order, it is called Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal. These 3 are basically the regional integration initiatives in the South Asia. But South Asia also has cross-regional presence with the Southeast Asia through ASEAN, particularly India. There are countries in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka in particular. They are also very interested to join Southeast Asia, particularly with the ASEAN. India, Central Asia through Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and India, Middle East and Gulf. It's called GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council. We have a preferential trade agreement. And there are discussions happening to to elevate these regional trading arrangements into a higher level. But there are several bilateral initiatives in the form of free trade agreement in the goods, sometimes in services, sometimes in comprehensive economic partnership agreement, sometimes in comprehensive economic cooperation agreement. There are plenty of those, United Arab Emirates, Australia, etc. And the one which is the oldest one is Sri Lanka in 1999, which came in effect in the year 2000. What are the driving pillars for South Asian regional integrations? There are different types of regional integration in South Asia. I mean, sometimes it is a trade driving, sometimes connectivity, sometimes corridor, sometimes energy cooperation, particularly in the BBIN context. Hydropower in Nepal and Bhutan, they'd like to be, evacuated from there. The surplus power is going to Bangladesh and India, like that. There is objective for technology sharing, particularly in the field of the hard technology. Then people-to-people relations, strategic issues. So in broad, South Asia, we see quite a dense regional cooperation and integrations is going on. But trust me that not everyone is very active. For example, this SAARC at the moment is not very active, and we know the reason behind it. The first speaker, the Galip, he rightly said, if the members of a regional bloc, if they don't have a trust, then the regional cooperation doesn't move forward. Well, in South Asia, most of them are developing blocs, southern countries, so there are many appetite with them that cooperate, collaborate, staying together and move ahead. But what are the differential shocks the South Asia they have been facing due to the polycrisis and uncertainties? And I don't need to go in telling you the details. And it's multiple crises they're affecting since pandemic, climate crisis, sea level rising, food and energy crisis, Russia-Ukraine war, Israel-Palestinian war, particularly shipping crisis because of the Red Sea. We can't use the Suez Canal, so all the way it's going to Cape of Good Hope in South Africa, which adding the cost and time. And there is an issue for the Panama Canal because of the water level going down, port congestion, rising freight rates. So basically the supply chain disruptions in different forms, those are very much affecting South Asia's business, particularly those countries who are export driven like Bangladesh, garment industry. Most of the garment industries in Bangladesh, they are in the verge of relocating, from Bangladesh to elsewhere. Well, we South Asian countries need to look at these as the shared challenges. So we have been telling that this is a polycrisis world. So let's stay together and build resilience. A crisis can happen in the future. I will go and a little bit add with my own in the next slides. Well, in the South Asia, the one which is very active at the moment is called Bay of Bengal Initiative. In short, the Bay of Bengal Cooperation means Bay of Bengal countries. There is regional cooperation blocks, and we call it the official wing of the Bay of Bengal called BIMSTEC. The advantage of the BIMSTEC over others, it's having a huge, they're connected by geographies. 75% is connected by the land. There are 25% the maritime and the maritime front. They have lots of opportunities in terms of the blue economy, in terms of sharing the resources, so on and so forth. And you can see the table tells you the countries that are sharing the borders, and not exactly with the Bay of Bengal countries, also the external partners like China, like with Pakistan, like other countries like Cambodia, through Vietnam, through Thailand, so on and so forth. So this is in borders we look at as an opportunity, not an barriers. And South Asia or Bay of Bengal, the bigger economies, if they do additional efforts, like in India in particular, always we have seen the first responder when there are crises happen. In the past, in 1991, when the Bangladesh had a huge cyclone, over 100,000 people died. India came first to help them. COVID-19 vaccine, India came first to help them, supplying food essentials and medicine. So a big nation or a multiple of nations in the Bay of Bengal, if they're sharing the responsibilities, so other countries, they feel encouraged. So this is an unique case where the big and nations like Thailand and in India, both, helped enormously in the Bay of Bengal countries, which has actually promoted and motivated Bangladesh to help to Sri Lanka in some times, or Sri Lanka helping to Nepal, like that. Let me come to the trade and economic integration part. Very quickly, I will run through that. Post-pandemic, we see the sharp rise in interregional trade. It's not just India, it's also Thailand. They're contributing. The graphs telling that the line chart tells that interregional trade is the highest peak, post-COVID. So the volume is likely to touch 201 billion by 2030. And the two countries which are vulnerable to the, any kind of an economic shocks, there are landlocked countries like Bhutan and Nepal. 68% of the Nepal for the global trade, or Bhutan for 97%, they depend on Bay of Bengal, interregional trade. So there are interest from different income levels to, on the Bay of Bengal. That's a beauty. Now, what are the outcomes? We see them driven by the free trade agreement, like particularly India and Southeast Asia. We see these different type of production chains and value chains have emerged. Automobiles like Toyota Camry, computers, Dell Computer, medicines, Notepad by Samsung, Panasonic, Apple iPhone 15. Then Apple is going to launch iPhone 16. So these are the regional production blocks which came in due to the regional cooperation integrations. But there are many challenges, remind you. One is this is very high trade barriers, particularly in the non-tariff. FTA in the Bay of Bengal is not happening at the moment, are pretty slow, and we see negligible interregional investments. You have a trade, goods, trade in services to move on, you need an investments. But there are quite good number of developments on the connectivity front. Like India setting up a Chabahar port in Iran, or Situate in Myanmar. India is setting up an economic corridor called IMEC, India Middle East Economic Corridor, going from India all the way to the Europe. There is, these are developments. And what is the, India and the partner countries, the Bay of Bengal, they have done? Mostly, it is basically an unilateral trade facilitation. And some form of the India's commitment, like a trade in local currency, application of the digital in payment system, so on and so forth. So these are, I have presented in a schematic form. So software side of the connectivity in terms of free trade agreement, customs cooperation, maritime security arrangement, etc. Plus development of the shared, educational system, like that in the Bay of Bengal areas. Let me conclude, that what we see in the South Asia or in the Bay of Bengal, that there's a change in the geography. We used to see in the western side, but we see the west through the east. So 2014, when the Prime Minister Modi took over, and he introduced an Act East policy. So the geography is changing very fast from 2014 to 2024, primarily within Africa, within Latin America, with Oceania, Pacific Islands, and America, like that. So, way forward, or if I may conclude, from South Asia, we see it's the golden, it's the heartland of Asia, lots of activities. It's not going to die, or it's not going to slow down, lots of potentials. Some of our, we realize, many are unrealized. Many connectivity projects are happening either unilaterally by India or Thailand. There are many things, many projects are yet to be completed. We need to think that strengthening regional integration for neighboring like ASEAN, IORA, Indo-Pacific, reaching out to Latin America, South Asia corporations. And since we have a group like this, the United Nations universities they've created, I propose that let there be some new studies and new academic contributions. Thank you very much. There are some publications for reference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prabir, for presenting the South Asian perspective and also for the nice visuals that you presented. I'll directly give the floor to our next speaker, Sineenat Sermcheep from Chulalongkorn University in Thailand. So moving further east, further to the southeast, to Southeast Asia. and we already saw that the region on the map that Prabir just presented, and so we'll dive just right into that region and into your perspective. So please, Sineenat.
Thank you, Frank, for your kind introduction, and I would like to thank Joel as well for inviting me to join in this very interesting webinar about like regional integration across the world, I would say. In my case, I would like to also share the PowerPoint as well. So okay, let me see. Okay. Okay, let me.
You can put it in the
yeah.
whiteboard. Yeah.
Okay. I hope it's up and running.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you. Let me. Okay. So the topic that I will talk today is about the perspective on Southeast Asian integration in a fragmented and polycrisis world. For the situation in ASEAN, I would say let's start by the current situation of the integration of the ASEAN. These are the 10 ASEAN countries we form as in terms of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in the year 1967. So if ASEAN is a people, so it's like 57 years old right now. So we come a long way as the journey for development that start in that year. Let's check out the key milestone for the regional integration here. And as you all know that ASEAN is kind of like one of the key driver of growth that the whole region can group together. Even though we start with in terms of the regional security issues, but later on the focus turned into more economic development. And as you can see here that ASEAN formed the free trade areas in the year 1993. So that's formed in the first group of agreement. Later on, the region want to, kind of like integrate stronger. So the ASEAN Charter came out in 2008 that give the institutional characteristic for the ASEAN region. And from that one, ASEAN, as you can see from this picture here, from the three pillars of the, you think about if it's a house or the building, these are the three pillars that support the growth of the region. So we have the ASEAN Political Security Community, ASEAN Economic Community, and also the ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community. And all those three combine together to support the growth of the region. With that one, the development of the region kind of like going through the journey, as I mentioned, but the key checking point, I would say, is in year 2015, that when we think about from the group into the ASEAN community. And for example, throughout those time, we have what we call the blueprint, just to see which way we want to go, how integrated we want to be. And after 2015, the next milestone is the coming year. So under the second blueprint of 2025, we try to kind of like integrate forward into, like deeper and broader integration. And those blueprint, they have it for all the pillars, but I just pick up the case of economics, just for example. One exciting thing is about that, like next year, we're gonna have complete in terms of the blueprint in year 2025. And the important thing is that we have to plan further. So the next blueprint gonna think about the year 2045. So it is very important for ASEAN as well that we need to sit down and see what we're gonna move forward into the future. Besides the ASEAN integration, as you can see here, ASEAN also participate with other partners as well in terms of ASEAN +1. So currently we have like 6 agreements here with our major trading partner, namely China, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and Hong Kong. Besides that, we are also part of the, the mega FTA, the ASEP. With that one, kind of like ASEAN with the 5 trading partner, as I mentioned up there, grouped together. According to all these things here, when ASEAN planning to group together, because each ASEAN country, we are like small and medium-sized country in a way. When we group together, it can mean something to the global market. And from that one, ASEAN try to kind of like grouping together, staying close together, and we always talking about ASEAN centrality when we expanding to connect to our trading partner. So that is briefly about the the integration so far. How well are we performing? This is some example for ASEAN economy, as you can see here. ASEAN, when we group together as one, we are the 5th largest economy in the world market. And as you can see here, so far from year 2013 to until 2022, we keep growing, except during the COVID situation that, we all get the impact from there. Besides that, international trade and foreign direct investment are the key driver of growth for the region. So we are the 2nd largest recipient of FDI globally. So you can expect to see that more investment, Western world or even the world from the Eastern side come to invest in the region. And example of the investment are the automobile and also electronics industry. And in terms of trade, we are more trade oriented as well. So we export a lot of goods to the global market. From that one, the region kind of like grouping together, but as we are in the world right now, situation keep coming, emerging challenges that affect to the region and everybody in the world. I would say that there are 3 main challenges that are facing ASEAN in terms of, the economic performance and also the regional integration. The first one is geo-economic fragmentation. As I mentioned before, that trade and investment, they are the key driver of growth for the region. Once the rising political situation between the big power, China and US happen, and since we rely a lot on the global value chain, we have to help each other in terms of producing things. So with that one, kind of like affect the way that investment gonna go to, the ASEAN region or go to, other country. So with that one here, it's kind of like with this kind of tension that, persists for a while and it keeps still there. It's kind of like create the problem to the issue because the slow growth and in terms of, how the country or how the region can produce efficiently. And the higher costs that happen from this kind of restriction can also affect the region capacity. The second challenge comes to the supply chain resilience and restructuring. This happened because of since the COVID-19 pandemic, because during those times, supply chain disruption happened, affect the region a lot. Besides that, also the trade war situation that, supply chain also get the effect. And also in case of what's happening right now, the climate change, it happened for many countries. And in Thailand, we faced those situations as well, like in year 2011, the huge flood and the supply chain kind of like stopped for a while. So with all those things, ASEAN need to, adjust ourselves, how to be more resilient in the changing world right now. And last but not least is a shift towards sustainability. All the green concern and also the situation about, like how to produce good and also live sustainably in the world right now is also affect the way the industry have to produce good. And since the ASEAN region, we work in terms of the global value chain production. So we have to think slightly and we have to adapt ourselves as well, how to, make the whole supply chain become green. And with that kind of thing, it's kind of like a huge challenge for ASEAN as well in terms of technology and also in terms of financing. So these are things that, like come up and kind of like ASEAN need to, how to be competitive in the future. They need to handle that kind of challenge. But in the challenge, also opportunity as well. During the restructuring of the global supply chain, as you all see that, some country, some firms, some company kind of like relocate their production to be outside China. So in some part, ASEAN also get the positive effect as well. But to really realize what kind of benefit, ASEAN needs to adapt ourselves to be able to be, like productive in the digital economy right now. The second point that can be the opportunity for ASEAN is that we are one of the fastest growing digital economy in the world. And with that one, we kind of like in the digital world, we can use digital technology to be the tools to kind of like enhance our productivity, become more resilient, and even go green. So in that case, there are kind of like potential for ASEAN to, like be more prosperous in the future. From that one, to look about the way forward here, I think for ASEAN, we kind of like continue on the main objective that we set in the, the first blueprint that we have on. We want to have deeper market integration. So in this case, we think about all 10 ASEAN countries, and also soon we can welcome our new member, the Timor-Leste, to the group. with that one, we're thinking about, not only for trade, but also in terms of investment, also of trade in services and the movement of the people. So we can work more on that aspect. Besides that, the FTA, it keep coming because as for ASEAN, US is one of the key partner, but besides that, you think about EU as well. So those are the two major trading partner that we would like to add on into the picture. So we think about the FTA currently and something beyond to our network in the region. Besides that, I think we cannot, we have to continue thinking about the, like key driver of the economy in the future. We think about green, digital, and innovation. So ASEAN kind of like trying hard to move into that direction. For example, they have like the DIFA, the digital economy framework agreement. That is one of the, progress of ASEAN to think about how to move forward in terms of digital integration. And last but not least, I think this is one of the, given the polycrisis and the dynamic world that's happening right now, as a structure for ASEAN, as I showed you in one of the early slides, that we have the structure in terms of the three pillars, in terms of politics, economics, and social and culture. But you can see that in many issues, the situation happened kind of like cross-sectional. We're talking about some issues, for example, like climate change. It's not only about economics, sometimes it's about the regulation as well, and also the culture and social aspect. So with that one, I think one of the key things that ASEAN will have to think further is that how to work in a more holistic way to respond to those kind of polycrisis. We can think about cross-sectoral, or we can think about the cross-pillar coordination. So those are things that, I think is kind of like the way that I can see from the case of Southeast Asian regional integration. And I confirm that with that kind of thing, kind of like the region can, move forward, and that is how it goes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sineenat, for sharing those insights from your regions. Very, very insightful indeed. And we continue our sort of world tour. We've been moving gradually to the east, and now we're going back, westwards. We'll move next to Babatunde Fagbayibo from the Department of Public Law at the University of Pretoria, who is going to give us the African perspective on fragmentation and polycrisis. Babatunde, please.
Oh, thank you, Frank. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, good. Thank you. Thinking through this, the fragmentation and polycrisis and how it affects regionalism in Africa, I think it's important to think about it within three frameworks, what I call the 3 C's. The first of it is the competition, what I call the crisis of competition. And the crisis of competition is how Africa finds itself in the middle of, geostrategic tussles between superpowers and global powers, and how Africa is expected, or African countries and even the African Union and even sub-regional organizations in Africa are expected to pick sides in this, this global tussle, and of course how that also plays out in the interest, not always to the advantage of the people on the ground, the interest in Africa's critical minerals. And we've seen lots of reports around that, this geostrategic interest in Africa's critical minerals. And of course, what the upsurge of your +1 summits as well, where it's now become very fashionable to invite African actors, invite a group of African actors to capitals in Asia, capitals in Europe, in America, to discuss Africa's development. I think the recently concluded FOCAC also highlights what some would call the rising interest in Africa's in African affairs. You'll see how Xi Jinping had announced that the bilateral relations now between Africa and China and African countries has now been elevated to a strategic partnership, and also, highlighting some of those things. And of course, some of this, you also see this play out, this geostrategic competition play out in involvement in African conflict as well. I mean, there've been reports on how, certain countries in the Gulf are actually, involved as well, support rebel movements in the conflict in Sudan and other parts of Horn of Africa. So you see that, and that's the competition aspect. The second, which I call the crisis of coordination, is the extent to which, defined by how African actors believe that there should be this sum of collaboration on speaking with one voice on the global stage. We've seen this also play out in, in how African actors are beginning to ask for change in global financial architecture, for example, in terms of, even the funding of climate change issues, and how, also the reforms of the United Nations Security Council, and how this also plays out again in terms of the way African actors also want to speak with one voice in terms of negotiating economic partnership agreements and trade agreements with the European Union, even with China and other global actors. So this coordination and this kind of approaches, and of course, Africa also presenting its position, its common position on, on global issues. The African Union is now part of the G20. So that's also some of the results of the importance of speaking with one voice at the global level. And the third part is the crisis of competence. So yeah, we can talk about competition, global competition, geostrategic tussles. We can talk about even the issues of coordination and the rest. But the next question we need to ask ourselves is the competence of regional institutions to be able to act on behalf of member states at the global level. And unfortunately, this is where, these contradictions also play out, where there's this kind of talk on the global stage about how, the African Union, for example, as the primary regional organization on the continent, has to represent the continent at global forums and all of those things, but it has, little to no powers. It remains an intergovernmental institution. Of course, the whole idea of, having a supranational African Union is still being debated. They have the African Union Commission Chair, Musa Faki Mahamat, has given about 2 or 3 speeches this year already on how member states continue to ignore the directives or the resolutions of the African Union. In fact, he says between 2021 and 2023, at least 93% of the decisions of the African Union has been contravened by member states. And of course, also the issue of finance, right? Regional integration is a capital intensive exercise. It is one thing to have, some sort of, vision, there's noble visions about it, but it needs money to move. And of course, the organization, the African Union, is still beholden to external actors in terms of funding, because again, its member states are not, coming to the table. But again, there's also been, an increase. So if you look at the quantitative element of regional integration, especially in terms of norms and policies, there's been this increase, since 2015, of policies, of resolutions, of even normative instruments to speak to having, to strengthen, the African Union. So we've seen the African Continental Free Trade Area, for example. There's been lots of activities around the African Continental Free Trade Area, and how to use that to enhance Africa's geostrategic position, to harmonize trade policies and trade norms on the continent, and of course to kind of give the African Union some kind of powers to be able to drive and facilitate this process. But as I've already said, the crisis of competence undercuts, in most cases, undercuts these activities. Also, peace and security challenges. There's been increase in conflict on the continent, and of course, as Musa Faki Mahamat also had said in his address to African Union, the Peace and Security Council a couple of months ago, says again the African Union is failing to be able to address all of this conflict, again due to external measures, and also due to the fact that member states also do not regard the policies and the principles of the organization. So I think these three areas, or these three, the three C's, as I call them, are areas through which we see these fragmentations and this polycrisis, and the extent to which the Union, the African Union, wants to respond to this. And again, we must also understand the complexities of regional integration in Africa. Yes, the African Union might be the primary regional organization on the continent. There are sub-regional organizations, recognized 8 through the African Union, but there are several other regional organizations which are, at different levels and different levels of development, and also there are competing interests, overlapping memberships, and all of those things. So those are some of the issues that continue to play itself out in the way the African Union as an organization, or African member states, are able to respond to some of this crisis. So I think I will stop there, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. So really lots of interesting thoughts and wisdom in there. I'll immediately continue our journey, so that we continue now moving northwards from Africa. We move to Europe. We have Gaëlle Pavic, who is going to give us the European experience, or perspective rather. She's my colleague at the United Nations University Institute on Comparative Regional Integration Studies. Gaëlle, please.
Thank you, Frank, and it's really a pleasure to give this first postdoctoral presentation. So indeed, fragmentation and multiple crises impact European integration, challenging cooperation at different levels. So with polycrisis, we refer to the convergence of multiple crises reinforcing each other. Yet the term crisis is often misused, at least in the European context. So, for example, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia since February 24, 2022 cannot be framed as a crisis, and even less as a Ukrainian crisis, but is really a full-scale invasion if we refer back to the annexation of Crimea and the support to separatist movement in the Donbas region since 2014. If this has already challenged the EU, the ongoing full-scale invasion has forced also the EU to rethink its security, providing weapons to Ukraine, yet refusing to take any step that could make the EU or one of its member states co-belligerent. So that's really also something new for the European integration, because since 1952, several projects have aimed at integrating further security policy at the European level. However, security and foreign policies remain to a large extent a prerogative of the member states. And when we talk about European integration, we really have to understand who is able to do what. So since 2009, the Lisbon Treaty has clarified the division of competencies between the EU and its member state, and they differentiate between 3 different competencies. So the first one is the exclusive competencies, where the EU can act exclusively. The second one are the shared competencies between the EU and the member state. And the third one, the supporting competencies. So this is all on the European Treaty, so it's really formalized by law. And while custom union, competition rules, fisheries and commercial policies are EU competencies together with monetary policy for the Eurozone, internal market, social and regional policies, energy, environment, transport, area of freedom, security and justice remain shared with the member states. So it's very interesting to look at the different level of action. And that explains, for example, why Germany pursued and embedded an energy policy with Russia, building 2 natural gas pipelines under the Baltic Sea, directly connecting the 2 countries, so Germany and Russia, and leading to an energy crisis in 2022, as Russian gas was sanctioned, yet is still exported to the EU countries via other routes, such as Azerbaijan. All the words crisis in my notes are in inverted comma, but you cannot see it, so I will show it. Then the COVID pandemic offer another example of what is framed as crisis, where the EU play a significant role despite the protection and improvement of human health being a supporting competency. Yet the member state mandated the European Commission to buy vaccine and redistribute them. Far from being flawless, this approach shows a willingness to act together at the European level during a sanitary crisis, emphasizing solidarity among former enemies. And this is really important. I want to take one example of Germany hosting, for example, French COVID patients, and especially those from the bordering region, Grand Est. And this is really symbolic when we know that this region has been at stake of 3 wars between France and Germany, and also involving other countries. So this example really shows that there is no fatality, that a change in narrative spread against the backdrop of concrete regional integration can have a strong transformative power. I really want to highlight this point. Migration, which cannot be framed as a crisis, but should be understood as a human movement that has always happened and is accentuated by war, global warming, and economic challenges, is another area where the EU must act together. However, the Pact on Migration and Asylum proposed by the European Commission in 2020 and adopted by the European Parliament in April 2024 contributed more to the problem than offer humanistic and comprehensive solution, I would argue. The emphasis on return, externalization, and detention-like settings for asylum seekers has been strongly criticized, including by many academics who have been conducting research on migration for many years, and including by our colleagues here at the United Nations University, but in many other institutes. Yet the Pact on Migration and Asylum was enacted. And linked with migration is the environmental crisis that the EU must face. The European Green Deal was launched in December 2019 to make Europe the world's first climate neutral continent by 2050. So it's really an official target by the Commission, and it's gradually adopted by the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union. So we see here the legislative triangle that is really at the base of the European Union. And this means that several pieces of legislation are passed to meet this objective. One example is the renovation of buildings, the Renovation Wave initiative, aiming at increasing energy efficiency. However, critics emphasize the insufficiency of this measure amidst environmental catastrophes that we are increasingly facing. And I want to highlight that most of the measures favorable to the environment that can have an economic impact are most of the time turned down. One of them, really concrete example, is, for example, is to reduce the price of train tickets to make it more affordable and also more attractive. Like when you decide to travel and you have to choose between flying or taking the train, why not to decrease the price of the train tickets? But then that will also decrease the profitabilities for train companies. In the view of identifying synergies and developing adaptable framework for sustainable collaboration, the following policy recommendation aim to promote regional progress and go beyond resilience as a buzzword. And since Frank mentioned, we will also write a policy brief. So these are the following policy recommendations I would like to convey. The first one is to overcome the zero-sum game. So to deepen the interdependence and complementarity and move away from this zero-sum game approach when one of the member lose what the other one will win. So to overcome this kind of thinking, especially at the regional level. The second one is the focus on multilateral challenges. So I mentioned climate change, where broad states are insignificant. So why does it make sense to act at the regional level? Because the level of the nation state is not the most relevant one. Yet the current main multilateral framework, so the Conference of Parties, the COP, is flawed by peculiar economic and political interest, and we will look at what will happen in Azerbaijan, but I'm pretty sure that unfortunately we will see this limits of the Conference of Parties framework coming in. And the last one, and I really want to emphasize it, is the need to overcome Eurocentrism. It was also highlighted by the first speaker, Galip, Dalay, so to reposition Europe and the European Union in a pluralistic world rather than considering European regional integration as universal. So I thus argue with the scholar Chakrabati that European histories, idea and experience should be seen as specific to Europe and not as a template for the rest of the world. So that's, on my side, I will leave it there, and I'm happy to expand further on all the points. I think you can talk much more on every aspect, but for the sake of keeping time, I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gaëlle, for giving us this very concise overview of how we stand in Europe, and we'll finish our world tour with the initiator of the seminar. So I'm very happy to give the word to Joel Peña, who is at the National Autonomous University in Mexico. So we're traveling westwards further, and he will share with us the Latin American perspective. So Joel, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Frank. And first, I want to extend a warm greeting to everyone who has connected with us today. And special thanks goes out to our esteemed panelists, Dr. Prabir, Dr. Babatunde, Fagbayibo, Dr. Gaëlle, Pavic, and congratulations for your defense, Dr. Sineenat and Galip, Dalay, as well as to our moderator, Frank Mattheis. Thank you very much. I'm very honored to have such distinguished expert with us, and I greatly appreciate your participation in this event. In particular, I would like to express my gratitude to Babatunde, the University of Pretoria, and also Gaëlle and the United Nations University Institute on Comparative Regional Integration Studies for co-organizing this webinar with my university, especially with my Faculty of Political and Social Science. And well, let's move forward with the discussion. In today's world, characterized by increasing fragmentation and complex crises, collectively referred to as polycrisis, as Gaëlle previously defined, the notion of regional integration has gained renewed importance. The global landscape is marked by widening economic disparities, particularly between the global north and the global south, along with challenges in governance, technological advancement, and human rights. In this context, regional integration, I think, offers a potential pathway to strengthen the capacities of nations, particularly those in global south, to navigate these challenges and enhance their roles as influential international actors. The region provides valuable insights into alternative strategies and policies for regionalism and cooperation. Effective integration is seen as crucial for countries seeking to increase their resilience and develop foreign policy strategies that prioritize collaboration, whether within their immediate geographical area, that means regionalism, or through broader frameworks involving multiple regions, that means interregionalism. But what is the global south? This term, like any other related to social science, is complex and extends beyond mere geographical and historical definitions. It encompasses structural conditions shaped by power distribution, decision-making processes, and a legacy of imperialism and neocolonialism. For practical purpose, for this webinar, the Global South generally includes regions such as Latin America, Africa, Asia, excluding Japan, and parts of Oceania. These areas are often characterized by economic challenges, technological gaps, and governance issues. Economically, countries in the Global South face significant hurdles, including income inequality, underdeveloped infrastructure, and a dependence on commodity exports. These factors make them vulnerable to global economic fluctuation, as we have seen in the recent years. Technologically, there is a stark contrast between these countries and their counterparts in the global north, with many lacking access to advanced technologies and digital infrastructure, which limits economic growth and educational opportunities. Governance challenges are also prominent, with issues such as corruption, political instability, and occasional authoritarianism hampering process. These factors, coupled with human rights abuses and socio-economic disparities, complicate the path towards sustainable development. In response to these challenges, there is a growing recognition of the need for enhanced regional integration among countries in the Global South. Such integration can bolster economic cooperation, but also facilitate technological sharing and promote better governance standards. For example, regional organizations like the African Union, the Mercosur, and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the ASEAN, work to strengthen collective bargaining power in the global trade, improve infrastructure, and harmonize policies to attract foreign investment. By adopting foreign policy strategies that prioritize regional and inter-regional collaboration, countries in the Global South can leverage their collective strengths to address common challenges more effectively. This collaborative approach can enhance their global influence, stabilize the region, and pave the way for sustainable development. Latin America, a key part of the Global South, has long aspired to regional integration. However, this process has been hampered by the reluctance of states to cede sovereignty, resulting in varied integration efforts, including speeches, informal meetings, and formal agreements. Currently, the region has several integration frameworks, such as the Andean Community, the Caribbean Community, the Latin American Integration Association, the Mercosur, the Central American Integration System, and others. Despite this effort, Latin American regionalism faces several crises that align with some of the challenges presented by my colleagues. For example, countries in the region often participate in multiple, sometimes conflicting integration initiatives, leading to inefficiencies. Diverse socioeconomic models and political doctrines within these frameworks cause conflicts that hinder their effectiveness. And many integration efforts established in the 20th century have not adapted to contemporary challenges, rendering them ineffective. And economically strong countries, such as Mexico, Brazil, and maybe Argentina right now, often prioritize bilateral relations over regional frameworks, weakening political unity. The region's integration efforts suffer from overlapping mandates, insufficient legal personality, and a lack of cohesive leadership, further exacerbating the crisis. Latin America also faces growing nationalist sentiments and discourses emphasizing national sovereignty, which hinder the establishment of supranational institutions with broader authority. Moreover, integration frameworks without legal personality struggle in international relations, whereas those with legal status can more effectively represent member states' interests. Intra-regional trade, and it's very important to mention, remains relatively low compared to other regions, reflecting a prioritization of economic dimensions over political, social, cultural, and environmental aspects of integration. The region lacks, in fact, the cohesive leadership needed to advance existing frameworks or establish new, more effective international organizations. But despite these challenges, regional integration in Latin America has had positive outcomes. For instance, approximately 70% of intra-regional trade is tariff-free, even though trade volume remains low due to a lack of economic complementarity and the preference for trading with external partners like China, East Asia, and the United States. Other positive aspects include the absence of warlike conflicts among member countries, contributing to regional peace, peaceful solution of disputes and conflicts facilitated by regular political dialogues and summits, the promotion of economic and trade cooperation, regional policies and programs in areas such as education, health, and the environment, and an increased regional influence in international negotiation and forums. These achievements demonstrate that regional integration can be a powerful tool for enhancing resilience and promoting development. However, for integration to be more effective, there needs to be a concerted effort to harmonize trade policies, deepen integration processes, and address political will deficit that often hampers progress. Latin America has a long history of striving for regional integration, yet its realization has been hindered by various factors. The region is fragmented into multiple overlapping integration frameworks, as I already said, each with its own challenges and limitations. Diverging economic models, political ideologies, and a lack of cohesive leadership have further hampered this progress. Moreover, the growing tide of nationalism had eroded the political will to cede sovereignty, a crucial step towards deeper integration, as we can see, for example, with the European Union or also with the Andean community. Despite these setbacks, Latin American integration has yielded some positive results, as I already mentioned, the increase of regional trade. But to build upon this achievement and address the existing challenges, the region must prioritize several key areas. First, it is imperative to streamline the current integration landscape. Overlapping and conflicting frameworks create inefficiencies and hinder progress. Consolidating these efforts into a more coherent and unified structure would be a significant step forward. Second, fostering a strong political will for integration is essential. This requires addressing the underlying concerns of member states regarding sovereignty and economic interests. A clear vision of the benefits of deeper integration coupled with effective communication strategies can help build consensus. Third, diversifying the integration agenda beyond economic cooperation is crucial. Yes, there's no only commerce. Incorporating social, cultural, and environmental dimensions can create a more inclusive and sustainable regional integration process. And finally, strengthening the institutional capacity of regional organization is vital. These institutions need adequate resources, human talent, and legal authority to effectively fulfill their mandates. By addressing these challenges and seizing the opportunities, Latin America can unlock the full potential of regional integration as a driver of economic growth, social development, and political stability. In conclusion, the challenges faced by the Global South, particularly in regions like Latin America, highlight the critical need for robust regional integration. While the journey toward effective integration is fraught with challenges, the potential benefits ranging from increased economic cooperation to enhance global influence are substantial. By learning from existing frameworks and addressing current shortcomings, countries in the Global South can better position themselves to navigate these complexities of a rapidly changing global landscape. As we move forward, it is essential to foster an inclusive discourse that not only analyzes diverse regional integration models, but also identifies synergies and cultivates adaptable frameworks for sustainable collaboration. By doing so, I think we can build a more resilient and cooperative global community capable of addressing the multifaceted challenges of our time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Joel, for sharing your wisdom on Latin America and again also on the initiative of this great webinar. So we have a bit more than half an hour left in our time slot before opening the floor for the audience to pose questions and to engage in a debate with our great speakers. I have prepared one question. Well, it's two questions, but I'll just do it in one round in order to save a little bit of time to enable the audience, which is almost 100 people. So I'm sure we're going to get a lot of questions from there as well. But we'll do a very quick tour de table of the speakers and I wanted to specifically pose two aspects because we've been talking a lot about fragmentation, about crisis, about that many projects, regional projects that you talked about have faced major challenges, some are in decline or at least stalling. But we also want to highlight the more say positive, optimistic side, so that even though the regional structures as we know them are not always adequate to respond to global challenges and to many crises, but I'd like you to identify like one strategy or one successful example of an adaptable or resilient regional integration aspect that can maybe provide also inspiration for other regions. So if you can just highlight sort of in telegraphic style one example in one specific area that you find noteworthy and that you think other regions should or scholars in other regions and policymakers should be aware of. And the second aspect links to that. We've talked a lot about state-led regional integration, geopolitics, etc. But what about the role of non-state actors in regional integration? We know they're very they're very active in cross-border phenomenon, exchanges, flows, etc. So what could their role be to effectively address challenges and promoting sustainable development? So I know it's quite broad questions, but in order to have time afterwards, I'll just ask you to be concise and brief here and to just give us a snapshot of what could be something to remember and disregard all the many other responses you might have for the discussions afterwards. So let's go in the same order as we've had before. So we started with Galip Dalay. So I'll give you the floor again, Galip, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. I think, the inspiration about the regional cooperation in the Middle East doesn't seem to be much.
I think I would like to emphasize one point that I think is crucial for regional cooperation not come at the expense of the people, but rather than serve the people. Your emphasis on the state-led and non-state-led is really crucial when we discuss the regional cooperation, because in today's context, in the region, the regional cooperation, regionalism, the state-led one, might very much come at the expense of the people. That might be actually a authoritarian collaboration rather than regional cooperation that serves the interests of the people. So it might actually serve the interests of the regimes much more than the people. And there, it is crucial that the societal integration or the non-state actors or the social movements leading the process is quite crucial. So I don't want to go much in what Gaëlle has discussed, but one inspiration that I think many regions, I can talk about the Middle East, can take from the European experience is the fact that, a group of committed people could make major changes, because this process, yes, it was state-led, but it was also the product of dreamer. So therefore, despite the ills of the Second World War, many people who dreamed a regional integration before it, if you look at this process in 1930, 41, 42, so the dreamer of 1920, 1930s who dreamed for a regional integration might have come across as proven wrong, or their dream has turned into a nightmare. But if you look at from 1957, their dream has come to true. So therefore, this dreaming of a regional cooperation that can serve the people, not only the interest of the regimes, should continue despite all the crises of the day. And I think that's the lessons that in the Middle East, that many non-state actors, many intellectuals, many social movements should take to the heart, because in the end, right now, a regional integration in the form of more societal integration is what I would say the region is needing.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for this this very concise input. Moving on to Prabir, what would be one successful example in the specific policy field of regional cooperation?
Well, very difficult to narrow down to one specific, recommendation. From my perspective, if I may add here, that we need a stronger secretariat. Regional cooperation integration succeeds only when you have very stronger secretariat. Like European Union is a good example where the secretariat is very strong. There are many regional cooperation integration initiatives that didn't go well because of the poor secretariat. So this would be, my suggestion. Plus, my reading and my experience dealing with regional cooperation integration also tells the larger economies, bigger nations, they need to contribute disproportionately more than, smaller economies, so smaller countries, when there are crises happens in terms of economy, disaster, anything like that, so that it gets, good impact to all types of members or member states. Well, these are some of my recommendations. Thank you very much.
Great. No, thank you for getting our attention on the institutional side of things. Moving to Southeast Asia, Sineenat, would you like to share your view?
Okay, thank you very much, Frank. I think for the successful example for ASEAN, I think it's follow what I just mentioned about the cross-pillar or cross-sectoral collaboration. I think one good example gonna be the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, which is a plan to recover the region after the COVID-19 pandemic. The thing is that it's cover 5 broad strategy. It's about the health system, about human security, also in terms of economics, and the part of the digital that can be the tools to help it, and also last but not least, how to make the region more resilient. So I think this is what we need to respond to the polycrisis situation. And in terms of the non-state role here, I think right now we can think about the mechanism that involve the people from the social aspect to be part in terms of when they're planning policy, or in terms of the public-private partnership. So more involvement of the stakeholder beside the government gonna be the part that really necessary for that one. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Sineenat. Indeed, polycrisis then needs a response that is covering transversally different policy fields. So that definitely makes a lot of sense. Babatunde, your thoughts?
Yes, so I think from the African perspective, one of the positives that could be drawn, at least in the last 4 or 5 years, in the field of continental integration is at least the adoption and the ratification of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And the positive of that, the positive aspect of that is that it has shown, it's at least it's shown us that if we devote more attention and we've put in more commitment to regional integration, we can, kind of gain results. Of course, there are problems, multiple problems, and there are challenges with the implementation, but there's been lots of traction that we have really not seen in the last 20 years, 25 years in the continental integration process that we've seen with the adoption and ratification of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Now, to the next point on non-state actors, at least this is one of the challenges of the African Union, where non-state actors are actually locked out of the process. One of the recommendations would be to pay more attention to activities of non-state actors, some of the activities that are not, in your, traditional format of engaging in regional integration, the roles of, young people, the roles of entertainers, the role of people who are doing all sorts of works, informal traders, cross-border traders, capture all of those nuances and actually use it as some sort of kind of pillar to propel. And as I've always argued in some of my works, and turn them into the foot soldiers of advancing continental or regional integration process on the continent. Thank you.
Excellent. Very insightful also to see where Africa has made advancements where some other regions have struggled, as we've heard. Gaëlle, up to you.
Yes, thank you. I will build on what Galip just said. So I want to mention the European Coal and Steel Community, the ECSC. I put it on the chat as a really key element of this European project. So it was established in 1951, so really a while ago, more than 70 years ago, by 6 countries, among them Belgium, France, Luxembourg, Italy, the Netherlands, and Germany. And the idea was to integrate the production of steel and coal, because without these two raw material, it's really difficult to have a production of weapon. And by integrating these two key components, the idea was to prevent war. So that's I think a very interesting initiative that can serve as an example, because not only it prevented wars but also fostered economic cooperation. So it's actually the cradle of the common market among the member states. So you remove tariffs, subsidies, restrictive practices, and also it contributed to industrial modernization. So that's, I think, really interesting practice, and also in terms of fostering supranational governance. So that's one of the, I would say, first initiatives when member states surrender a degree of their sovereignty to a higher authority. So pretty much what we see in the European Union now, so with a high authority, which is the precursor actually of the European Commission. And this precisely could make a binding decision to the member states. So that's quite important, I would say, and a very important landmark also to the creation of the European community with the Treaty of Rome. So I would mention this since it has a strong legacy. And when it comes to the role of non-state actor, I want to highlight one of them, which is a civil society organization. I really think that it's important for regional organization to ensure the participation of civil society actors, also to strengthen the democratic processes, to make sure that these regional institutions do not become kind of cut from the society where they are embedded, but indeed speak to this society and with this society and for this society. So that's something I could say to have the law, policies and practices that enable the development of this civil society and its participation to the largest extent as possible.
Unmute.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. I had trouble with my unmute button, so I'm sorry about that. So, so great. Thank you very much, Gaëlle, for also pointing out that for success stories we shouldn't only look at contemporary examples, but also we can look further back in historic narratives and examples. Let's finish up with Joëlle. So your views on examples and on civil society, please.
Thank you, Frank. I would like to now focus on an external stress factor that represents, I think, an obstacle to Latin American integration, the growing influence of China and to a lesser extent, Russia in the region. These countries, as we know, have emerged as significant alternatives to the United States, presenting attractive trade opportunities and offering appealing benefits through partnerships like BRICS Plus. For example, their increasing presence, I think, complicates regional dynamics by providing member states with diverse economic and strategic options, which can undermine efforts to deepen integration with existing regional frameworks. And to address these challenges, there are several strategies and highlight successful examples of adaptable and resilient models. Fostering regional cooperation is one approach, where countries can enhance economic cooperation and technological advancements through shared resources and expertise. But another strategy is building alliance, because by forming alliance and adopting cooperative frameworks, countries can unlock opportunities for growth and development. Various Latin American integration regimes have demonstrated how such frameworks can promote peace and mutual understanding. Additionally, learning from successful models is emphasized with a focus on successful integration experience such as the European Union. The EU, as we know, has established a more solid political agenda through interregionalism compared to bilateral relationships, offering valuable lessons for other regions, including obviously Latin America. And regarding non-state actors, unfortunately, they are often marginalized during the formation of integration regimes. This exclusion is regrettable, given that these actors should play an important role because their involvement ensures diverse perspectives are integrated into policy formulation and implementation. Also, non-state actor plays a crucial role in regional integration by addressing local and sector-specific issues that state actors might miss. Their involvement increases the legitimacy of public support for policies, as diverse stakeholders' input makes them appear more fair and representative. And additionally, these actors enhance capacity building, drive innovation, and offer flexible solutions complementing the state resources and expertise. Moreover, non-state actors help ensure accountability and transparency, advocate for marginalized communities, and contribute to equitable distribution of integration benefits. Their participation in conflict resolution and peace building is vital, for example, also for fostering a stable and cooperative regional environment.
Great, thank you so much, Joëlle, for sharing this, and to all speakers again for first presenting the perspectives more generally, and then focusing on the two issues that we pointed out just now. So we have 20 minutes left on our clock, and I'd like to thank the audience for being so patient. For it was very dense and rich discussions. Sometimes maybe also demanding, because we're of course not always specialists on all world regions, and so it takes a bit of effort to take on the comparative lens that we want to encourage. So we're very grateful to have you here, and now is the chance for you to engage with our fantastic speakers. So please, if you do have any questions which can be either general questions on related to crisis and regional integration more broadly, that then different members of the panel could respond to, but it can be also reactions to one specific region or one specific topic that one of the presenters raised before. So feel free to raise your hands, and we'll bring you into the discussion. Or if you can't speak, just you can also type into the chat box if you have a specific question in there. I don't see anyone yet. I see a reading recommendations in the comments. That's also always very welcome. Thank you for that. Who in the audience would like to break the ice? The first step is always it's a tricky one. Who would like to give it a try?
May I?
Yes, please.
Thank you. This is a question. Well, I have a set of questions, but I'll try to make them short. The first one would be addressed to all of our panelists, who may take this opportunity to thank very much for all of their presentations. I'm just wondering whether they would be optimistic about cooperation, about inter-regional cooperation or cooperative regionalism. I'm wondering about their own vision of the most creative institutional innovations that they might think of. I know they've already addressed this issue partly as the first answer to the question that Frank recently raised. In other words, what would be their favorite criteria for delineating institutional innovations, which, as we know, are not sufficient actually for regional building, but they are an essential component, definitely. Then I have a question for Prabir in particular, bearing on Southeast Asia. I'm wondering, because I think there are two elements that we haven't had enough time to deal with. One of them will be the security dimension, even the strategic dimension, and the other one would be the cultural one. As far as military integration in South Asia, could Prabir tell us a little more about intra-regional military integration? Given the proximity of China, I think this is an essential dimension, certainly. He can also tell us a bit more probably about the state of strategic discussions within the Indo-Pacific involving India in particular. Then I have a final point, probably addressed to Sineenat from Thailand and Hong Kong, on her perception of the Belt and Road Initiative, because this is definitely one element of the ongoing regional processes that we're witnessing, and the cross-regional new processes that we have to deal with. I'm wondering in that sense, what her own perception as an Asian scholar, what her own perceptions are of the cultural and identity dimensions are in this process, because we've dealt a lot today with connectivity, with economic change, with trade issues, etc. What about culture and identity for this matter? Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Brigitte, for those very salient questions. Before giving the floor back to our panelists, is there anyone else in the audience who would like to come in? I don't see anyone at this stage. If that's not the case, well, we'll let the audience reflect a bit more. And I think with those three questions, we already have quite a bit to launch a discussion here. So the institutional innovation. It's true that many of the speakers considered the importance of strong institutions, so looking at what could be some elements in there, and then we had specifically the question on the security cultural dimensions in Asia, but also then the last one on the Belt and Road Initiative, so not only as an economic project but also as a more as a broader cultural identity and narrative. So I'll give the word back to the speakers. Feel free to pick the question that is most appropriate to you. And of course, the speakers are also welcome to pose any questions among them. So we are, even if we're sitting in different rooms, we're also happy to have a dialogue between you. So if you have any specific points or questions to one of your co-panelists, feel free. But let's start with Galip again. Please, the floor is yours for some brief comments.
Sure. Well, I mean, probably I am one of the person here that talks about regionalism in a region that is the least regionalized. So therefore, not much positive news or inspiration to take from. Probably it will be more of actually what to avoid rather than what to emulate. Might be. Recently, there is a tendency of talking about, particularly before the latest Gaza war, and there was a tendency about talking of how to enhance the regional cooperation in the Middle East, bearing in mind that the region was supposedly experiencing some calm and that there was different normalization attempt at play. The countries was normalizing the old rivals, etc. And there the idea was basically to have low politics element or subjects or topics for discussion to provide the common ground for cooperation. And there would be talk about the climate change, the disasters management, the water sharing, and similar topics of supposedly low politics. But the trouble in the region that I see, there is very little distinction between the issue of high politics and low politics. Any low politics can be politicized and be made high politics if the actors that involved in this process wants to make out of it. So therefore, unless you have de-escalation, some form of consensus or modus vivendi at the high politics level, it's really very difficult to take the low politics subjects. Within the European context, obviously we talk about coal and steel, as Gaëlle excellently put it. So there would be this more the functionalist account of achieving the regional integration, because once you take an area or a sector around which you start cooperating, and then slowly you will be cooperating on others area and sectors, and then this the function logic of this cooperation in itself will take you quite far. But I think in this region, because one thing that we always tend to forget, the 6 founding members of the European project were all of them back then democracies. So there was the illegitimacy of the domestic political orders, or the domestic political orders in these countries were not contested. It rested on the legitimacy and the will of the people. And once again, that takes you to the first question. How can you achieve a significant level of regional cooperation by the actors that very much fear their people and very much knows that they're on a shaky ground on many levels? We know that the Arab Springs, many regions, many actors, many regions were overthrown with the Arab Springs. Now there's a tendency that the region has entered a post-Arab Spring era, which once again means that there's some form of a new authoritarian status quo taking place. But all the grievances, all the factors that led to the Arab Spring has only aggravated. None of them have been resolved. And this is really the background that forms the perception, the misperception of many actors that will approach the question of regional cooperation. And that's why I see very low ceiling for regional cooperation in the Middle East, even through the low politics areas, unless and until the question of the domestic political order of the state settled in one way or another. Otherwise, you know, we can talk about like many frameworks, the Negev Summit, the Abraham Accord, etc. See, a few months ago, we were talking about, like a year ago, we were talking about Abraham Accord, a new process between Arab state and Israel, the cooperation that will flow from this. Then, you know, the Palestinian question is fully back on the regional and international stage. But only a year ago, everyone thought that the Palestinian question belonged to the past. So now the region has different agenda items. So supposedly there was, you know, taking the topic of a book on the European politics, Old Europe, New Europe, Core Europe, or like, you know, Old Middle Eastern question, New Middle Eastern question, Core Middle Eastern question. Once again, everyone realized it's a Core Middle Eastern question that cannot be just wished away. So therefore, even on the low politics topics, I do not see any significant cooperation framework in the region taking place, precisely because of what I mentioned, which is the regimes fearing their people and the illegitimacy of the domestic political order of the state in many parts in the region.
Thank you, Galip. No, very good points. With that, there has been indeed the idea of where more functional technical cooperation could advance regional integration, but it's a good reminder too that we cannot use it as a substitute for political disintegration or fragmentation. So if that is not addressed in tandem, then issues such as water cooperation, etc., might be very futile. Very good point. Prabir, please, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Well, time is very limited. We can't go and discuss many serious things in South Asia. So I'll be very brief. There are three questions on to me, and in any way we can do a bilateral further discussion if needed later offline. One is, I think, case of military integration. If you know the South Asia geography, pre-47, the same land. So it's got divided, split in 8 countries. And today, South Asia integration is progress, but not the SAARC. If you talk about a SAARC, which is the official integration process of South Asia and SAARC, two different things. Now, on the military integrations, very strong and very deep-rooted, integration happening between the countries in South Asia. I can only add an example, training and capacity building. Most of their military officers, they get trained in India. And so also in the Indians, they go to other countries in South Asia. This is one example, Sometimes it gets slow down. Presently, you have seen the change in the government in Bangladesh. But whatever the lectures I offered to the National Defense College in Delhi, I see there are, equally good number of participants, senior military officers who are attending and getting in lectures. So training capacity building in the military integration is something, which is happening. It's going to need to be, it's a learning from each other's strength. If you come to the deep, hardware integration on the military front, the India-Bhutan is a great example. Understanding is so rich that, we complement each other. There are growing amount of things that are happening in the maritime front, on the maritime security and maritime safety. So while it comes to the military integration is a work in progress, and if you come to the Bay of Bengal countries, this things varies compared to what we see in the South Asia. I stop there on the military integration, but if I look at other two questions quickly on the cultural front, cultural integrations. Look, South Asian countries, they're common, they're connected by their culture, heritage, cuisine, food, music, etc., etc., etc. And the countries, particularly in Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, they enjoy deep cultural relations. Pakistan, Afghanistan, Maldives. Two examples that India and South Asian member states succeeded to set up: South Asia University and Nalanda University. There are a fair amount of visas and for health and education purposes extended to other members of South Asia. So also they extended to the Indians, So the cultural front, this has grown, very deep, strong relations in track 1.5 to track 1. Last, to reply to the Indo-Pacific, well, Indo-Pacific, it's a security arrangements, but if you look at an economic one, India came out of RCEP, but when it came to the IPEC, Indo-Pacific Economic, Prosperity Economic Cooperation Agreement, primarily driven by the American. India is a member of, the 3 pillars, not the trade. So something there is, happening on the economic front of Indo-Pacific. But if you look at a quad diplomacy, the vaccine or cultural relations or extended scholarships to the quad member countries, so something is happening. There are, I'm aware of it. Last but not the least, whatever in Indo-Pacific, we see it's on the maritime security and safety. India has introduced Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. So also the ASEAN, they introduced ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific. Well, Indo-Pacific is a work in progress. There are common challenges in the maritime front. Countries that delegate unilaterally, bilaterally, the way they would like to be. And I think progress, we need to see the gap. I closed down, but this year, by this statement, that this year, we are remembering 20 years of the great tsunami that happened in 2004, 26 December, Indonesia, in Aceh province, that actually killed, more than 150,000 people in the Southeast and South Asia. India was the first responder to reach out to Southeast Asia, particularly Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesian islands, Mauritius, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and African countries. And so on for the maritime front, we have very good understanding, and Indo-Pacific, still it is security arrangements, and we look forward to the leaders to drive it. I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabir. I'll give the floor directly further to Sineenat. I'll ask you to be a bit brief. I'm trying to keep track of time. We're almost running out of our slots. So if you can be brief, maybe just focusing on the BRI question that you got. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Frank. So I will directly to the BRI question on the cultural identity for the region. So thank you, Bridget, for the interesting question. BRI here is from China initiative. It's kind of like the way we, the result is that we create connectivity, not only in terms of rail and road, in terms of business and trade, but they also bring the people as well. So some example can be in case of like Sihanoukville in Cambodia, Babatunde in Laos, and also Chulalongkorn in Myanmar before. It's kind of like when they bring the investment to the region in ASEAN region. When the people, they bring their worker, the owner are Chinese, some of them, they come to the region to open their shop here. It's not only about business, but those people kind of like they want to live their life when they are at home. So something like that. They bring also the restaurant, they also the salon and many kind of, like the shop and those selling that they used to consume at home. So I would say that what Bridget mentioned is kind of like directly to the question as well, because it's not only trade, but when they come, they bring, like the culture with them. One thing I can see when we have the field trip to some of this city is that all the shop, I mean the when they write down the name of the shop is all Chinese in that main city. So it's kind of like it changed the culture of the people in that region a little bit. Some of the city, they used to be like quiet in terms of like agricultural base, something like that. But when the investment come in, they turn to be the like industrial group, or some of the city, it turned to be like the entertainment hub. So that's kind of like affect the way people live their life over there as well. So yeah, that's also something happened. But that happened in the city that with a huge amount of investment from China come in. But for the other city, I would say that one characteristic of ASEAN is that we have diversity in terms of, like nationality, religions, and things like that. So in general, the Chinese people, we are everywhere already. But in terms of the chain that directly to the culture, I mean, the big chain to the group is more to the city or the part of the country that have a huge investment, like those names I mentioned before. So that's how it happened. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Babatunde, some last words from your side?
In the interest of time, I'll yield my time to the next panelist.
Okay,
We're really running out of time.
Perfect. Thank you, Babatunde. That's very kind of you. Gaëlle, do you have any last words?
Thank you. Just maybe a last point on optimism. Indeed, like we talked a lot about crisis, but the European Union was built from a crisis. I mean, more than a crisis, but full-scale war, the Second World War. And we see currently as well some dynamics when the regional integration is strengthened by what we frame as crisis. So that could be a way forward as well. And it would be interesting, we don't have time now, but for further discussion to see if it's also the case in other regions. So that could be maybe an idea to continue the discussion. So yeah, because we are closing, I'll leave it there, and thank you again.
Well, thank you very much, Gaëlle. That's indeed a very good point. Joel, last words from your side.
Thank you very much. As Babatunde, I will pass the floor to you, Frank, but not before thanking everyone for participating in this magnificent event. And please be aware of the policy paper that we will share with all of you in the coming weeks. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Well, I can just echo that. So it's my pleasure also to thank everyone, all the audience that have been attending. Thank you for being with us, all the speakers, and of course, Joel, again, you for pushing forward that idea and for approaching UNU-CRIS with that idea. It was really our pleasure to be part of this. So what I learned was certainly that we do have a lot of regional structures that are not fit for the purpose of dealing with many of the global challenges, but then we also pointed out, well, that it doesn't mean that regional integration is sort of it's the end of history for regionalism, but rather it's a period where we see some experiments. There's ideas on how to cope with different types of crises. Not all of them are working properly, but there is still a spirit of regional integration in all world regions. In some, it's currently more active than in others, but it's certainly not a thing of the past. It's just something that is adapting, and will certainly all the speakers here, but also us at UNU-CRIS will continue to be attentive to what is happening there. So thank you again very much to all of you. Please keep out for the policy briefs that will be published from UNU-CRIS and from any further events that we'll have in the next few months on regionalisms in different world regions. So please keep up to date. So thank you very much again. I think the speakers will just stay on for one family picture. I think Joel just asked me if you can stay, but to everyone else, thank you for attending, and have a good either day or evening, depending on where you are. Goodbye.